Well, welcome to the Meridian Adventist Sabbath School in Meridian, Idaho. Let's start with a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, as we start a new quarter about the three cosmic messages, we know that you want to be here with us and you have asked us to spend time with you. We're grateful for that. These are sometimes challenging to understand, but we know that you've promised your Spirit to help us so that we can understand about your love and how much you care for us. So thank you for giving me the words today and those who are here in Sabbath School. Amen. As I mentioned, we're starting a new quarter, and it is entitled, let's see, no, I didn't do that. The Three Cosmic Messages, aka the Three Angels Message, if you're not familiar with that. And I see I need to update my text. Last one of the .coms there is overwritten, but I think you get the message. That's where, if you're interested in looking at additional materials, you can find them. So let's start right in. Jesus wins, Satan loses. I'm not sure I would have put it as Satan loses. He does lose, but I don't think that's the real point. And then the various titles, I still don't understand why they don't title Sabbath and Friday, but I'm okay with that. Shall we say the memory verse together? And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Well, for someone who has looked at this several times, I am reading many things into that. I think those who have been Adventists for many years would probably do the same. Somebody reading it for the first time might wonder, what's this with the dragon business? What's that about? And who's he that went to make war? Who's the offspring? What are these commandments? What's the testimony of Jesus Christ? What are those things? And we're going to unpack some of those a little bit. Frankly, these lessons are laden with information, and there's no way that we can go into detail. You probably could take these things and do several years' worth of sermons based on them. So we're going to touch on some of these things today, and hopefully you have read through it and will be looking through other things. So what is at stake? What is at stake in this lesson? What is the three angels' message about? Maybe we should look at what are the three angels' messages. The first angel's message is the gospel, the good news. Well, to be good news, does there have to be bad news? Doesn't there have to be something that's good in order, you're like, oh, that's good, so it's better than something else on a scale of good, better, best? So the gospel is good news. What is the gospel? What is the good news? Jesus won, yeah. Jesus wins. And then worship God. When we say the word worship, many things might come to mind. We can think of people who worship by bowing down. Nothing wrong with that. Some people worship by sacrificing animals. Some people in the history of the world have sacrificed children. The God I worship doesn't authenticate that method. So worship, and then judgment is here. And who is being judged when it talks about the judgment? God is being judged. And God's being judged based on how I and you are being judged. How does that work? How can a judge be judged? Do you see the juxtaposition of the idea, the concept? It's a little bit, might be tough to wrap your mind around. So how is God being judged? If we can certainly think about how, if you've ever been in front of a judge in your life, I have. I ran a stoplight. Didn't realize it at the time. went before a judge, and I asked him, how come my testimony, which conflicted with the officer, how come you believe the officer and not me? And he said, well, that's because the police officer is an officer of the court, so it carries more weight. So I believe him, not you. So we were both there. What does that say about the judge? You see the implication? Pardon me? He has the authority. And if he makes, what if he makes a judgment where he just decides to throw out the law? And we're live streaming, and that's why we have a microphone. But you don't have to use it. It's not required. We appreciate it if you do, but if you don't, that's fine too. So welcome. So how God is going to be judged on how he handles the whole sin issue. We'll talk more about that. The second angel's message warns against worship outside of what's in the Bible. The Bible gives clear directives on what is worship. And then the third angel's message is don't worship the beast and his image. What would be the commonality between those three? What word occurs in all three? Worship. So this is about worship. And we think of perhaps people who want to be worshiped or need to be worshiped, people who crave that attention, and those who don't. So these are critical messages. Back to the first question, what's at stake? Well, my life is at stake. Your life is at stake. That's the prize. The Bible is full of symbolism designed to stand against the test of time and change. So think about that. If you were going to write something that was going to, if you were going to communicate something, I shouldn't say write, because writing wasn't always the way of communication, nor was art. So what was the most common form of communication, say in the early part of the history of the world? Person to person. So if you're going to have a communication that goes the distance of time from just verbal to what we have today in forms of communication, that would be a tough challenge, wouldn't it? I mean, if you were a marketing person and somebody said, yeah, I want you to do this thing that's going to cross thousands of years, it's got to be clear also. That'd be a little bit tough, wouldn't it? So the Bible uses symbolism because those symbols help us understand, even in our current day versus people that, they didn't even know what writing was. Satan, we want to, of course, define some additional things. Satan, or some people pronounce it Satan, means adversary. So automatically we know we have an adversarial situation. Merriam-Webster, I forgot to put in the reference to that, indicates that a devil represents a spirit of evil, an evil spirit, a wicked person. But even wicked, isn't that maybe could be concerned? How do you define wicked? Evil, but what is wicked to me? Is it wicked to you? What about my neighbor down the street? Are they going to define wicked? What about somebody in another country, in another continent? Is wicked going to be the same? One of the challenges we have with language is even if we speak the same language and we're raised in the same town, we understand words differently based on our own experience. So these are some of the challenges that we face and that God faced. I also, and it wasn't necessarily mentioned in the lesson, but I think this is important. How was Satan a murderer in heaven? Are you familiar with this verse in Ezekiel? You were blamed. Actually, the next one talks about it. But you were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until the wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence. What do you think Satan was trading? So imagine you're an angel, you're in heaven. What do you have to trade? Here, I can trade money, I can trade services, I can raise food or produce a product, and I can trade that. But you're in heaven, so what are you trading? Power? Chaos?
It can also mean a thing like you have a business and you are a certain trade or brand.
Yep, your brand. So what was Satan branding? What was the concept that he introduced in heaven? There was harmony in heaven, and then what? Satan, Lucifer, angel of light, right? Closest to God. Yes. He accused God of being unfair. Can you trade that? Can you spread that as a message? The word trade, you see where I'm going with this, with the definitions? The word trade, we have to look at that and try and figure out what would that mean today. Then it would have been the closest word they have for a concept. He was spreading ideas. And in this other verse, hi Tony, it says, you are the father of the devil. This is Jesus speaking, and he's talking to the Pharisees. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning. So again, going back to how could Satan be a murderer in heaven? Did anyone die? Can you be a murderer if nobody dies? Yes. Is it green? Can you push on the bottom? If you push on the bottom, then the light should turn green, and then it should be on.
I think what defined what is weakness or evil is the moral law.
The moral law.
And the devil was a murderer because God says, do not talk about other people. That is, things that are not truth.
Things that are not true.
When we gossip or say things that are not truth, we are murdering.
I think I agree with you, we would be short-sighted to think that in order for there to be a murderer, there has to have been somebody immediately murdered. That's how we define it. We look at some of the shows that are available online, on TV, and you see they talk about somebody got murdered, there's somebody dead. But Satan was a murderer. He was sowing seeds of doubt that eventually will lead to death. There wasn't an immediate death. But if you are the person, perhaps that set a trap so that somebody else would die, would that make you a murderer? Does somebody have to actually die? Or if you just wait long enough, it's going to happen. Yes?
I think sometimes murder also means not the literal physical death of someone, but also it can be the spiritual death of someone. He took a third of the angels with him.
Yes, he took a third of the angels with him.
And he tempts us every day to do wrong. You know, he talks to me an awful lot, and I immediately have to pray and say, take it away, Lord. Anyway.
We might also, if you think about saying, he was murderous. He had intentions of murder. So how do you wage war in heaven? What weapons are used? It's not a knife. It's not a gun. It's not a missile. Words. Your words become thoughts. And the words that he was trading, to use the word from the Bible to understand again, what he was suggesting is God's not fair. In fact, when you're forced to follow these rules that God has set up, then God is forcing you. That was the idea that he was. And does love force? No, it doesn't. So he was saying that God isn't love. So the weapons are ones of mind. So now, several minutes into the lesson, of which we have another about 25 minutes because we are going to cut the lesson shorter than we normally do because we have some other things going on today. Long events. Due to time, I'm going to skip over that. But I did want to put this in. It wasn't from the lesson, but I thought it was a good example. Gideon had 32,000 men against 135,000 Midianites. And we see that 22,000 went home because they were afraid. That would be a 4.21 ratio. In other words, if they were going to win, they'd have to have each of the Israelites would have to kill 4.2 people, or roughly 4 people, right? Somebody would kill 5 and even things out eventually. And 9,700 went home because when they stopped to drink, they didn't keep their eyes open for the enemy. They just, they were leisurely in the way they did it. Most times when you're a commander and you are fighting a war, you want more people, don't you? You want more people on your side so that you can have a better ratio of, possibilities of winning. And here God's saying, no, Gideon, you have too many people. Why would he say that? Because he wanted to let them know, I want to make this so clear. This win wasn't you. It wasn't the people. If they were going to win, it was going to be something else. And so they ended up with 300 remaining, a remnant, against 135,000, which is a 450 to 1 ratio. Can you think of any battles where it was hand-to-hand combat and somebody with a ratio of 450 to 1, they won the battle? You know any records of that other than this one? I don't know of any. I mean, it sounds impossible to me. And yet throughout the Bible, God woos, instructs, and warns us. He's trying to send a message. The message here from Gideon was that God wants us to learn, I think. This is the lesson I'm taking away. You take away the lesson you believe. Is that God was saying, look, it's not about you. You're not the one who has to win. It's not about your, muscle strength or how good you are with a sword. I got this. And frankly, as someone who's not a very good fighter, although I would say in my youth, my brothers, I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. My brothers left me alone because I was just a little bit crazy. If difficult to irritate, but once I was irritated, boy, I didn't care how much I got hurt. Somebody else was going to get hurt. So my brothers just, they would be like fighting over, and then they'd come over, oh, that's John, so let's go fight over here. We don't want to get him upset. And I wasn't really that good at fighting. I just was a little bit, outrageous in what I would do. And so you can understand that when we're talking about a battle, we want to be well prepared. So Sunday is talking about the battle in heaven. A war broke out. Again, a war of what? Words and thoughts. And Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail. What would happen if you had somebody where in your household there was peace and calm and everyone got along, and then someone came into the household who just caused all kinds of trouble? Would you want them to stay there and just continue causing trouble? Wouldn't that be unpleasant? So was it fair for God to say, okay, Satan, this is enough? Everyone got a choice, didn't they? God didn't just kick out people, the angels. He said, okay, you got to make a choice. Either you're going to go with the law of love, or you're going to choose these other thoughts that Satan is peddling. And so they were cast out. There was a battle. Freedom to choose is a fundamental principle of God's government. Our country, the United States, was sort of based on freedom. When it said we the people, who was we? Did we include slaves at the time that was written? Did we include women? Did we include non-landowners? The principle, we have a fantastic, magnificent country, and our laws are predicated on freedom. We don't have a perfect country. We have lots of problems. We do. There's no question about that. But the freedoms that we have were based out of the Bible principles. And many, all of the people who signed the Constitution had biblical influences in their life, even if they weren't, they had differences of belief. But we can understand that we are created in the image of God and we make moral choices. But there's very good news, incredibly good news, that we have free will to choose to be on God's side or not. That's our choice. But it's not so much a choice at the ballot box, is it? How do we demonstrate our choice? How do you vote? But when you choose God, can I just say, I believe in the Bible and I believe in God, and then I go and have dishonest business dealings and I beat my wife? Am I voting for God? Is that love? So what is our vote? Obedience. So God wants us to be obedient. He's looking down us and take. Is that turned on? Because I can't hear you. Is there a green light?
Yes.
Okay.
He's given us a way to live for our benefit.
For our benefit.
For our benefit.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Yes.
The free choice that I think I have is letting God to fight my battles. And so my battle will be just letting God to fight for me, because every time I try to fight, I'm going to be put down. So using my free will is to ask God to give me the strength to stay on Him. Like Jesus says, that if we abide in Him and He abide in us, we have victory.
We have victory. So I want God to live in me, but I can tell you that this week, Larry, you had something to say?
I'll pass this.
Oh, you'll pass it. Thank you. This week, I attempted to do many things. My wife was out of town. We had some work done in our house. I put in some new baseboards. I'm preparing for this lesson. And there's a whole list of things. I'm working full time. I was very tired. I have to tell you, my Fitbit sleep scores will attest to being tired. I didn't sleep well. And as I reflect on how I responded to some of the things that happened this week, I have to say I'm not proud. Some of the things I'm proud about, but some of them I would really like to redo them, because I was not a nice person sometimes this week. I did things to other people who are God's children that I regret and have apologized where possible. That, to me, is the battle. The battle is when I begin to take ownership of, that's my wife, or that's my mom, or that's my, coworker, and they owe me. And they don't. I don't own them. They're not mine. I am not God. And my actions should have not be predicated on how they're acting. Because when I look at how God treats me, it's certainly not how I'm acting. God loves me very much and has gone to a great deal of effort, regardless of how I respond. And some people have rejected God altogether, and He still loves them. That is our example. That's what Jesus did. And as I reflect on my life this week, I have to say I didn't do that well. But the good news is God says, no, keep going. God's our cheerleader. I remembered the slide. It's coming. Why does sin, separation from God, kill? Any thoughts on that? He is the source of life. So if you have an electric light and you have it plugged into the wall and you disconnect it, the light goes out, doesn't it? It's a natural consequence. When it says God's angry, God's wrath, I think what God's mad about is that somebody that he loves chose to die. He's not mad for any other reason. He wants us to live. The Bible tells us that God is love, he is holy, he is just. And when you choose to separate from God, that's when you're going to die. Not immediately. Just like Satan's actions in heaven did not have his murderous thoughts didn't necessarily have an immediate action. Sometimes it is immediate and sometimes it's not. If we are to be in Philippians 3:9, it says, not having our own righteousness, which is from the law. Paul tells us that the law was never intended to save us. But there were some people in the Jesus day who thought, yeah, if I just follow the law, I'm good. I can be mean to my fellow man, but as long as I'm following all the things that, can check the boxes, I'm good. And Jesus said, no, it's a much higher thing than that. In fact, even you can't keep all the check boxes. And second, it's much more important than that. So when Paul wrote in Philippians 3:9, how can that be our own experience? Well, we want to move to Tuesday to find out about that. We want to accept Jesus' victory. 7 times in Revelation's messages to the 7 churches, it uses the word overcome, to conquer, to prevail, to triumph, to come through victoriously. Well, I don't know about you, but I love winning. I didn't win a lot of things. I was not a particularly athletic individual. And so when it came to school things, I didn't. And my teachers probably were very disappointed because they said, this kid has a lot of potential, but he just wants to do C-level work, maybe less. And I figured out that I could get by. And it wasn't that I wasn't interested in the school, I was. I just didn't like doing the work. I liked reading. And every time they gave me a test, they're like, oh, he passes. I don't know how he's doing that. I wasn't dumb, but the teachers were frustrated, and rightly so. My 5th grade teacher got me, and I got really good grades in 5th grade because she understood, oh, this kid's a little different. We're going to take a slightly different approach, and I worked very hard in 5th grade for her. Unbeknownst to that, it was helping me. What do you think her goal was? Was she just interested in having one more student that was performing? Or do you think that she actually cared about, this is going to be important to John's future life? She was foreseeing what would happen. And I think that's what God's looking ahead at, saying, this is what's going to help my child. And so I'm going to allow certain things to happen. It's possible for us to be overcomers through the blood of the Lamb. Not through my strength, but my strength in surrendering. It's a concept that is a little bit hard because of the way we think about winning. Surrender doesn't sound like the right way to win. And there it is. I break for offering. Do you like that? So I'm going to pass this around. Start with Chris. If you could just pass that around. That's for our mission offering. And if you look on the back of your quarterlies, if you have them, this tells you where it's going to Inter-European Division. And we're going to see some of those things in Mission Spotlight, which will be coming later in our program, which we're playing for your benefit. So moving forward, I just put the slide in there because I get it caught up in the lesson and sometimes forget to do that, and we don't want to forget our offering. The woman in the wilderness. So the great dragon was cast out, the serpent of old, and he was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him, Revelation 12. So who is the woman? the church. So it was a building? The church isn't a building? It's people? Wow, so I can take a group of people out on the beach and we can have church, right? I think that's a great way to do church, especially if it's a bright, shiny day. If it's raining, well, then maybe not so much. Again, yes. Faithful souls constitute the church of God. That's a great way to put it. Here again in Revelation 12, which was a lead up to Revelation 14. Revelation 14 is, of course, where we find there are three angels' messages, which we talked about earlier, so briefly. And here's more symbolism. A woman, the church, was given 2 wings of a great eagle. And again, why was this symbolism chosen? Because it was handy for 5 minutes? It was symbolism because it needed to last for a very long time. And people needed to unwrap it, unpack it. And there's talks about a time and a times and half a time. The lesson has, we are very limited on time this morning, and we could take several hours if we wanted looking over how this works out. It's in the lesson. I chose not to cover it because there's other things. There was the serpent, which is a reference to the devil, to the dragon, spewed water out of his mouth, but the earth helped the woman and swallowed up the flood. So we see in Revelation 12 a way that they're communicating the conflict. The devil is very interested in killing off God's people. Again, in Thursday, God's end-time remnant people. And remnant means what? The same as the original. Yes. And how much of the original is left if it's the remnant? I mean, my mom sews, so whenever I think remnant, I always think the end of a bolt of cloth. That's my personal understanding of the word remnant. It's what's left. It's part of the original. It's exactly the same. And so in Revelation 12, it says, the dragon is angry with the woman. The devil is furious with the people who keep the commandments of God, and he will do everything to destroy them. So again, when we're talking about keeping the commandments, are we talking about a list? I like lists. I love lists. I'm a list keeper. When I have a job, I would like to write out a list and then check things off, add additional detail as we go, make sure that everything got done, so that when a job is done, it's nice, it's complete, it's everything you hope for, and then maybe even make notes for the next time. Do you do something like that? So I think that God is interested in us keeping the commandments. So what commandments? There were, I want to say, over 600 in the Old Testament. But as you just said, Mom, love God, love your neighbor. So what does love look like? Some people would think, oh, I'm going to define that as romantic love. I think I'm not going to discount that. The Bible has the Song of Solomon in it, and it talks about lovers, people who care about each other. But the majority of the Bible is talking about how much God cares for us and what he keeps doing to have his people. And the ones that he can trust the most are the ones that sometimes go through a lot of challenges. Job, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Could God trust Gideon? Gideon trusted God enough to say, well, I'm going to do this test. I think this is God talking to me. This is an angel. I'm weak in the knees. I'm about to fall over. I'm seeing this being that is supernatural. But I want to have a test just to make sure. Because God's asking me, I think he's going to ask me to do something probably outrageous, like go into battle against 135,000 people with 300. 450 to 1 odds. You'd have to have a lot of trust to do something like that, wouldn't you? You would. So God's trying to get us to trust, to keep us to trust that when you keep the commandments, even when it appears to be you're going to lose your life, trust me. God's already won, but we are still in the battle. The war isn't over. Eventually, the dragon is going to instigate a decree so they can't buy or sell. If you live on a farm and are you can take care of yourself, that's not really a problem, is it? But if imprisoning them with and facing death, that might be a problem. We read in the history of Huss and Jerome and some of the other people who were uncovering and unlocking things that God was leading them through his Holy Spirit. And we see that they gave their lives, many of them. Because they gave their lives, other people said, wow, there must be something there. Instead of running away and saying, I don't want to die, they're like, what is different about that person? So God can use those. I don't think God doesn't want any of us to die. He's made that clear. But he's also said, maybe as my soldier, you could do something for me to bring others in. And that's going to be hard. Some of that's going to be hard from a worldly perspective. But from a loving perspective, I think Jesus got tired, don't you? When he was out doing miracles, and because he didn't get a good night's sleep. He often spent many hours in prayer. We know that. The Bible tells us that. So he didn't get a lot of sleep, but he was often looking out after others. So here's this 3 cosmic messages are telling us what's going to happen in the future so that we know when it happens, we won't be surprised. And if Satan can't destroy Christ, he's going to attempt to destroy the object of Christ's deepest affection. If I can't hurt that person, I'm going to hurt this person over there instead. Because I know that pain transfers. We know that we read the Bible story about Christ's crucifixion, and it says that the sky darkened. God withdrew his presence. God only withdrew his presence, but he was there suffering with his son when he died. So I think that what sometimes we hurt and all we can see is our hurt. And remembering that God was with Jesus can help us in our times of affliction. Thursday talks about so we see the, I'm just going to go past some of this because I wanted to get to, we're out of time. Nope, we're not going to do that one. What role does our choice have in determining our behavior? We have a choice. The clock is off. That's why I keep looking at my watch. I can't just look up there and go, yep, I'm out of time. Final thoughts. My first wife was legally blind, and she got glasses, and she told her dad, look, Dad, the trees have individual leaves. She had amazing vision with glasses. And she had a tremendous memory as well. This is a battle for our minds. The battle is against principalities and powers. If we think it's about saving our lives or the wrong thing, we will perhaps make a bad decision. But no earthly weapons are going to do the job. That's not going to be it. We have a simple choice to listen to the liar or listen to the one that only speaks truth. And one of the challenges we have is understanding what the lies are. If we listen to the truth, then we have life and have it more abundantly. Look at the world around you following the liar. The liar says not following God, love, is freedom. But how much freedom is the world demonstrating? And if you're convinced that this world is not living the right way, then how you live will be an answer to that. Thanks for participating today. Our lesson next week is about a moment of destiny. We are going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back quickly. Let's have a word of prayer. Our Father, as we begin our opening quarter looking at the three angels' messages, so critical for our time and how we can share with others and bring them to know of your love, we ask that your Spirit will come to us and continue to come to us as you have promised, so that we can be more like you, loving and caring, and demonstrating what it's going to be like in heaven. And we give thanks for answering this prayer. Amen.